Why do you see so many brand new dual sports with less than 1,000 miles with thousands of dollars of mods and farkles added to them for sale on Marketplace? Well, it's because people often start out on the wrong dual sport. So today, let's talk about the 5 worst dual sports for beginners in my humble and often inaccurate opinion. Before we jump in, I'm assuming a few things here. I'm assuming you want to ride off-road. If you don't want to leave the pavement at all, then my opinions will be irrelevant to you. Mostly just buy whatever bike it is that you're looking at that seems the most fun for what you want to do. I'm assuming that you want a dual sport, otherwise you wouldn't be watching a dual sport beginner's video. And I'm assuming that you have limited to no off-pavement experience on a dual sport. Maybe you have some street riding experience. Maybe you've spent a little time on a dirt bike, but for the most part, you're looking for a bike to get started on your adventure and dual sport journey. Also, these are my personal opinions. I've ridden almost everything on this list, but my opinions are subjective, and why I try to explain my reasoning, I often don't know what the hell I'm talking about, so take it all with a grain of salt. Okay, let's jump in. The number 1 dual sport that I think is terrible for beginners and you should avoid if you're a new rider is the KTM 690, Husky 701, Gas 700. They're all the same bike, essentially. This is a very powerful dual sport bike. It has adventure bike power, if we're being honest. It is a 36.4-inch seat height. It costs $13,000. I think you should start cheap wherever possible, and $13,000 is not cheap. In my experience, and admittedly it's limited with this bike, so again, grain of salt, but this is a jack of all trades type bike. It's supposed to be great at both the street and the dirt, and when I rode it, I kind of felt like it was kind of not great at either. So you can get better bikes for one or the other if that's what you're looking for. I did not have a particularly good experience with it on my test ride, but I'm hoping to get more experience with one this summer. I've had a few people tell me I was incorrect, people that I trust, and that it's a more capable and better bike than I thought. But regardless of that, I still don't think it's a good bike for beginners. In the hands of an experienced rider, it is a very versatile and capable bike, but there are less expensive and much easier to ride dual sports to start on. So I would encourage you to look elsewhere if you're considering a KTM 690, Husky 701, Gas 700 as your first dual sport bike, or a bike for a beginner rider. Along that same line, while we're getting the obvious bikes out of the way, the number 2 dual sport I would not recommend for beginners is the KTM 500 EXC-F and the Husky FE501. I would just go ahead and throw in there the KTM 350 EXC-F. Yes, there are some differences, but it's still not a bike I'd recommend for beginners. And hell, while I'm at it, let's just throw in the Beta 430, 390, and the 500 as well. Also, any plated dirt bike like the WR450F, stuff like that. These bikes are twitchy, they're buzzy, they're tall, they have frequent maintenance intervals. Like the KTM 500 is 500-mile oil changes and 1,000-mile valve checks. Obviously, people push past that. You don't have to do that exactly unless you're racing all the time, but it's not the 8,000-mile oil changes and 16,000-mile valve checks of the Honda CRF450L, which is a much better bike for beginners. These are unforgiving bikes. They're difficult to ride. They're powerful and light. They're not good for new riders, and they're expensive. I just don't think you should be throwing $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 at a bike if you're a brand new rider for the bike you're just going to drop the most, and you're getting a lot more bike than you can probably handle anyway. I think the KTM 500 EXC-F is the best dual sport motorcycle on the planet. No kidding. Like, in terms of power and weight and capability and stock suspension, it's a great, fantastic bike. However, you should not buy one if you're a beginner. Stay away from it. The number 3 dual sport you should avoid if you're a beginner, and this one will be controversial because someone always comments when I put out a list for beginner bikes, someone always says you forgot the Suzuki DR350 on your list. And I understand why they recommend it. You know, it's reliable, it's not that heavy, it's not super powerful, but you know, half the models, literally half the years they made the DR350 were kickstart only. That's an automatic disqualification from me. Take it from a guy that tried to start his daughter out on a kickstart DRZ 125. Learning to ride off-road and kickstart do not go together, because it is a real pain to kickstart that bike when you're in an uneven territory situation after you've crashed and dropped it. Also, these bikes are just old. Like, yes, you can get them cheap, but you can spend $1,000 more and get a much newer bike, like 10 to 20 years newer. I'm not kidding. Unless you just really want to work on a bike, you want a project bike, you want to spend as much time in the garage as you do on the trails, or you're already a mechanic, or you're an aspiring mechanic and you want a bike to learn on, I would just avoid the DR350. You can get a newer DRZ400, which is not my first choice for new riders, but a much better bike in my opinion. Just overall, I would avoid the DR350 for a brand new rider, unless you just get one free or something. Number 4, this one should be obvious, but a lot of times new riders don't know what's obvious. Case in point, I get asked about the 450s a lot. Should I get this 450? I'm brand new. Absolutely not. But it's only 450 cc's. That doesn't mean what you think it does. So an example of this, the number 4 bike that I don't recommend to you as a new dual sport rider is the Kove 450. I've seen this one pop up a few times as the ultimate ADV bike because it has a big fuel tank, isn't super expensive, and has, quote, only 50 horsepower and is a super capable bike. Make no mistake, if you hear me say nothing else in this video, hear this. This is a literal rally bike. They race these in Dakar with slightly different configurations and not that much. The whole point of it is that they can just crank out the same bike for consumers as they do for their rally teams as cheaply as possible. So this is a literal rally bike. In the hands of a skilled rider like Giant Loop Ryan, who I have seen riding this thing, doubling up tabletops and stuff at the MX track, in the hands of a rider like that, the Kove 450 is an absolute weapon. But like any weapon, if you don't know what you're doing, you're awful likely to hurt yourself. This bike has a 38-inch seat height, an incredibly stiff, rally-tuned suspension. It's designed for riding hard and fast, charging up hills and over obstacles. It is not comfortable at all, and it is twitchy and unforgiving. I've ridden one. It was a blast. Even I was like, oh, this might be too much for me. A new rider has no business on this bike, none whatsoever. So avoid the Kove 450 if you're a new rider. It just isn't that good for new riders. And if you go sit on one, you'll immediately know what I mean. And then number 5, worst dual sport for beginners, is one that I owned and rode, near and dear to my heart, but I just don't think it's a good bike if you don't have a lot of experience, and that is the Honda CRF450L or the CRF450RL, depending on what year you get. I rank this bike dead last in my beginner dual sport tier list, which you should check out when you're done with this video. If you're curious, you've heard what I don't recommend, you want to know what I do recommend, that's a great video for that. This bike is twitchy and tall as hell, and the worst part, and I hate to say this about a Honda because I love Hondas, Honda fanboy through and through, you need to put a couple grand into this bike to make it a good bike for dual sport riding. It's just not good in stock form. It dies, it's twitchy, front end dives when you let off the throttle. You need to buy an ECU at minimum, that's at least $800. But if you're gonna do the ECU, you probably should do the exhaust, that's another grand. You need new tires, and these bikes are already very expensive, new. Now, they're not as expensive as the KTMs, although again, the KTMs are on sale, but it sucks to go out and spend $10,000 or $11,000 on a bike and know that you need to put another couple grand into it. The maintenance intervals are super short, just like the KTMs, technically 600-mile oil changes, although you can easily stretch that to 1,000. I did it on the Oregon BDR on that bike, and it's just not a good bike for a new rider because it's powerful and not forgiving of mistakes. It's like the KTMs and betas that way, except not only do you have that issue, but you also have to put $2 grand into it right when you get it in order to make it as good as one of those bikes. For dual sport riding in particular, it's a motocross tuned engine that's designed for charging at 60 miles an hour through the desert. It's not designed for the intricate slow speed, clutch feathering, stop and go kind of technical stuff that we want to be doing or that we do a lot on dual sports. So I just don't think it's a great bike for beginners, despite the fact that it's a super reliable Honda. And again, get away from the only a 450 thing because that doesn't mean what you think it does. So I love Hondas, my favorite motorcycle manufacturer. I'm unashamed in saying that. I've said it 1,000 times, but for beginners, that 450L ain't it. It just ain't it. So what do you think? Have you started on any of these bikes? Tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. I know that you will. And what bikes do you recommend for new riders? Maybe leave that in the comments too. Let's get some community knowledge going here. Also, please consider subscribing if you want to see more dual sport and adventure bike content like this, because I'm the dork on the road and I want to be your internet riding buddy. And I'm better than your regular riding buddies because I come with a mute button. If you want to support the channel, support future content, you can click on my affiliate links to Rocky Mountain ATV, MotoCamp Nerd, Amazon, Revzilla, Cyclops, Butler Maps, Flying Eyes, and a bunch of other places. Get yourself a discount and support the channel at the same time without even trying. So I appreciate all of you that have done that and continue to do that. And I hope it is worth the extra 2 seconds of your time to support dorky motorcycling content and my daughter's college education. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Excellent!
Pira,